Today, we're making one-pot Greek-style beef stew. Very simple, but extremely tasty. First, we sear the beef. Today, we're searing beef chuck, which comes from the first 6 ribs of the beef, the 7 being the beginning of ribeye. 1 rib apart, 3 times the price. This is the perfect stewing dish because with long and slow cooking, the connective tissues break down into very yummy collagen and they'll become fork tender in about 3 hours. All right, hot pot, we season. Salt, pepper. Now, pot is smoking hot. High smoke point oil, in this case vegetable oil, goes in, shimmering, and beef goes in. Very important that you form just one layer. You do not want to crowd the pan. The moment the pan starts getting crowded, they end up boiling themselves and it defeats the purpose of searing. When making stews, I always prefer my meat chunky. Once we've got the good browning, then we dice them or slice them however you like. What you don't want to do is you don't want to use cubed meat. They release so much moisture that it will take much longer to brown. And by the time they're fully browned, you've overcooked the outside. So always keep them chunky. And because we're stewing, we can always skim off the fat at the end. So I would be quite liberal with the amount of oil you add in the beginning. This is the first stage of making a stew. The browning, the Maillard reaction, which means cooking protein at high heat. This is what's going to give your stew the meaty flavor. And while our beef is browning, we prep some vegetables. Today we're doing Greek style, so lots of whole shallots. If they're still sticking a bit, give them more time and they'll eventually release themselves. Now, that is browning. Chop an onion. Doesn't have to be too fine, you're gonna cook it for 3 hours. When you're browning for a stew, imagine you're cooking a steak. That's the kind of browning you want to achieve. All right, we are good. You take out the beef and we brown the shallots a bit. This is optional. I've tried both ways. They taste the same, but they look slightly better. So, your choice. Ooh, the splashing though is not cool. Now, the shallots took on a bit of the colors. We add the onions. Again, we salt, pepper, and now we have entered stage 2 of the stewing process. The sweating. We're introducing flavors. Why are we adding onions? Because by cooking them slowly, we're evaporating the water content and we're introducing some sweetness to the dish. The principles are the same for most stews. So while that's sweating, we're now going to dice the meat. You simply will not achieve this kind of browning without having to severely overcook the meat if you had diced meat. I like them really chunky, so this is how I'm gonna slice them. Perfect. All right, now that the onions are translucent, we add some garlic. I always add the garlic a bit later because they're much higher in sugar content and they burn way more easily, especially when you're using a garlic crusher, because you're now puncturing the membranes, the cell membranes of the garlic. Cook it for another minute. Now, an optional ingredient which is definitely not a Greek recipe. This is salted anchovy puree. You can find them in most Italian shops. I promise you, this is not gonna make your stew taste fishy, but it introduces so much umami. It would make the meat way more savory. So, please try it once. The principle of the anchovies is quite similar to Japanese dashi. It's a fish-based broth, but they go so well with beef. 2 more flavors to introduce, again optional. The first one is definitely not Greek. Star anise goes extremely well with beef. Some bay leaves, and we add the beef back in. I always do that before adding the stock so I could gauge how much stock I need to add. There's no point diluting the flavor too much and having to reduce them at the end. Meat juice back in. And because we didn't use wine this time, we're gonna introduce a bit of acidity. I'm doing this at the very end because I don't want it to have too much time to evaporate. And then we add the chicken stock. This is store-bought chicken stock. If you have homemade beef stock or veal stock, great. But if you're using store-bought, I always find chicken stock provides the best quality and the best amount of gelatin. Cover the meat, at least most of the meat, and welcome to stage 3 of the process, the actual stewing. So now we're gonna bring it back to a boil and then lower the heat and let it stew for about 3 hours. I'll see you then. All right, after 3 hours and a couple of glasses, we check on the beef. Oh, beautiful. So towards the end of the 3 hours, I skimmed off most of the fat, took out the star anise and the bay leaves, and this beauty is what we have. Everything is spoon tender, the connective tissues have broken down into gelatin and in turn thickened the sauce. This is the consistency that I like in my stews. If you want a thicker sauce, it's very simple. All you have to do is to take 1 shallot, a bit of the braising liquid, and liquidize it. Put it back, and you will have a very thick sauce that is full of shallot goodness. But today, I'm very happy with this. Something like this, I just like to serve it in the middle of the table family style. But since we're on camera, let's plate one, shall we? And now, remember the other half of the lemon that we juiced. This is unwaxed lemon, by the way, if you believe your grocer. And a bit of lemon zest on top, just for some brightness. You can add any herbs, chives, parsley. With this style of stew, I like it clean. And there you have it. 1 pot Greek-style beef stew in 3 hours. I really hope you enjoy. Finally, we filmed this one. Boom.